Hello, everybody. It's Stephen here with Walter for our weekly episode of So Chatty, episode number 73, and it's September 2nd, 2022. So we're heading into fall weather soon, unfortunately. So I'm sure you saw last week's So Chatty was a special edition. It was our big fabric haul. Some people said, well, what about Walter's fabric? No, Walter bought fabric, but it's not part of that haul. And he showed what he bought. Are you making grunting noises?
Yeah,
Why are you making grunting
I
noises?
don't know.
This is what I live with. So, anyways, we showed Walter's haul on Stephen and Walter Live last Sunday. So, catch the broadcast or rebroadcast if you didn't catch the live to see what Walter bought. Nowhere near as much as I did, of course.
I'm poor.
Well, you're poor, yeah. Bite my butt. No, you just make shirts. You don't need a variety.
Yeah.
It's it's one fabric. We are
No, I haven't made anything for a while.
No, you haven't. You should.
Yeah, I know I need to get to it.
Actually, did you get everything finished that you had been working on?
No.
No. So I guess those short sleeve shirts that you haven't gotten finished yet. Well, we're getting near the end of, well, that'll be nice for next summer, won't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Whatever. Okay, unlike Walter though, I have been productive. I have been working on a few things, so I thought I'd show you what those few things would be. So this is not done. I'm still playing with this. I'm doing some appliques, as you can see, with the snowmen and the stars and the snowflakes and the gifts. And I've got one more gift to make. Actually, I've already made it, but I made it after I took this picture. These aren't where they're going to be located on the quilt. I'm just sticking them there for now with a pin because I was trying to decide how I'm going to go about this. Now, my first idea was I would quilt the quilt without any of the appliques on it, and then I would sew the appliques on afterwards or just stick them down with like steam a seam or with some fabric glue, because this is more of a wall hanging than a quilt kind of thing. So really it probably will never see a washing machine unless somebody threw up on it. Not saying that couldn't happen, but then I got thinking, well, could I attach the appliques on to this quilt if I use the long arm? Is that a possibility? So I went on to YouTube, which we all do when we need to know the answer to questions. And yes, there's all kinds of videos where people actually do raw edge applique on their quilt when it's mounted on their long arm. But then I got thinking, the problem with that is you're going to see sort of an extra outline, whatever way you've kind of stitched this on. And of course, you can't use like a blanket stitch or something like that. You're going to have to use a straight stitch. And I don't think I could keep, I mean, the long arm moves very easily. And that's a great thing, but it's also a disadvantage because when you're doing finer sewing, like the kind of thing you do on your sewing machine, you have less control on the long arm for something like this, like applique. So I got this feeling, I'd have stitches all over the place on the back of the quilt. But then I remembered that this computerized program, Quilt Path, that I have for the long arm, has something called Eclipse, where essentially you set it up and tell the machine when it's doing an edge-to-edge design to skip over something and not stitch in that area. And it figures it all out and keeps everything looking like it's continuous, but it bypasses an area that you have set up. Now, I've used that feature on the table runner I was working on for my sister, which I'm going to show you in a second. And although it didn't have any applique, the theory is still the same. So what I think I'm going to do now is I'm going to, before I put this on Lucy, I'll put it under my needle on my domestic machine. I will sew the appliques down. I think I'll just use a straight stitch. Someone suggested that I could use like a blanket stitch on the snowmen. Problem is the snowmen had been done in my embroidery machine in the hoop applique, and they have all around their edges satin stitch. So that would not work well. I don't think a blanket stitch on top of a satin stitch, well, I think it would also cause you some problems in the stitching because, satin stitches tend to be raised up a little bit. I think that would look like a mess. But I think if I'm careful and I just go around on the inside of the satin stitch, uh, and sew them down that way, then that'll be fine. And then I'll use the eclipse feature when I'm quilting it, and all should be well. That's my theory. You know what happens with my theories. Something I didn't expect always happens. So that's my next major project. Right now on Lucy, I have my Halloween quilt, no pictures of it. This is the table runner I made for my sister. It's a little skewed looking. That's not it. It came out straight. It's the right proportions. It's just the way I took the picture because I put it on my dining room table. You can see Walter standing over off to the one side, and I got up on a chair to take an overhead shot of it to get it all in. Um, she seemed to be happy with it. We took it to her yesterday. If you notice in the center square, the quilting in it is different than the rest of the quilting. I did feathers and I alternated the rows, but the design in the center is not really feathers, it's something else, but this is where I used the eclipse thing. I marked out that square, did that one first, so that's custom quilting. So yes, I have advanced in my use of the long arm. So, practice makes perfect. Um, I'm pretty happy with the way it turned out. What did you think?
It looks nice.
It looks nice. Yeah, high praise from this. So, anyways, except I had one little problem with it. I got it the top all together before I put it on Lucy, and Walter noticed there was a little tiny mistake. You want to explain the little tiny
Well, the
mistake?
square that's supposed to be in the center was kind of at one end.
Talking about this thing right here, in here. Um, see, you alternate these braided like pieces. And when I made the prototype of this, because I made another one and I showed that last week, which was a little shorter. But this is one of those kind of designs where the more of these pieces you add to it, the longer it's going to get. And she wanted 72 inches. And the pattern, if you just did the pattern, it was something like 40 inches when it was done, or 42. So I just added more of the strips to either end. But I'm thinking to myself, well, why should I have to flip it around? I can just add it, you know, right along the edge. Well, no, because this part has to be in the middle. Because what happened was this part was way up here and it had all these rows down there. And I didn't really notice it. And I was very proud. I take it up and said, look what I did. Look what I did. First thing that comes out of his mouth.
How come that square looks different in the top?
And I said, it doesn't look different. And I looked at it and went, shit. So I had to rip those out. Now, it wasn't that difficult ripping them out because all I did was I took a chunk off one end and put it on the other end, and it equaled out because that's just the nature of the beast. Except I now have Y seams, and no, I wasn't attempting the Y seams. I've done them before. I sort of know how to do them. I'd have to refresh my memory about that. But then I thought, my luck would be I'd have a lump right where the Y seam is, and I don't want that. I had lots of that fabric. I cut, in fact, I didn't really have to cut many more pieces because I had overcut the number of pieces I needed. So, and it took me 20 minutes to put the pieces back on, like the other ones, without having to do Y seams. So I did that. It just wouldn't be one of my projects if there wasn't something that Walter couldn't find that was a mistake in
Yeah, it
it.
was pretty
It
obvious.
was, yes. And my sister would have found it for sure. And yeah. So, anyways, it is absolutely perfect now. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So, and she seemed to be happy with it. So that's good. Oh, don't want to go there yet. Okay, so, okay, come back. Where's my mouse? Get back over here. Let's go down here. Okay, so that's what I've been up to. And as I said, I'm working on a Halloween quilt right now. It's on Lucy, and boy, it's pretty dense and takes a long time on this one because I'm doing this spider web and spider kind of thing on it. And the design I got, didn't realize it was going to take that long. So it's going to take me some time. Anyways, I'll show that when I get it done. Okay, before we move on to the main discussion today, craft and chat next Wednesday, September the 7th, starting at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, running until about 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. come, all are welcome. The link is in the show notes below. Those of you on my mailing list, I just sent out the notice with the Zoom link to you this morning. So all are welcome, new and old alike. Doesn't matter if you've been here before or not been here before. It's a friendly, supportive group. Everybody gets together and works on whatever you want to work on, kind of a thing. It can be any project you're working on. It doesn't have to be a sewing project. It can be anything. And you'll find that everybody's very, very friendly. It's a very comfortable atmosphere. And if you're having some problems with something you're working on, all you have to do is mention what the problem is. You'll get answers because that's the kind of group that it is. So that's this Wednesday, September the 7th. Link is in the show notes below. Okay, so today, needle threading problems. We've all been there. We've all had them. Some of us have problems threading the needle on our sewing machine, and that's what we're talking about, the needle on your sewing machine, not a hand sewing needle, for a variety of reasons. But then some people have been cursing, and many people do, and I was one of those people as well, curse the automatic threader system on the more sophisticated sewing machines. It's supposed to make our life easier with that, and it works the first time we get the machine, and then it stops working, and we're very frustrated with it and have to take it into the shop or just basically thread the machine manually, which can be done. Walter prides himself on being able to thread his machine. Are you throwing up?
Yeah.
Well, that's fun. That's just fun.
I have a little bit of gas.
Ooh. Okay. We'll do this quickly before Walter explodes on me. All right. Wouldn't be pretty. Okay. So Walter's prides himself on being able to thread any machine manually. I'll tell you about a little thing, though, that he has a little problem with, and he refuses to learn how to do it. He'll have an excuse for that. But anyways, before we get to that, let's talk about why people have problems threading their machines, okay? What's the most obvious problem, do you think, why people can't thread their machines manually?
Needles in the wrong position.
No, lesser.
Um, what?
Has to
Well,
do with the
not
hole.
manually or
Manually.
um, they can't see the hole.
Yeah, exactly. You can't see the hole. Now, I have that problem. I wear these, but these are for close up. Well, yeah, you'd think, but if I get too close to something, everything goes blurry. And let's face it, needles on sewing machines are not in a position where the average person can get under there and take a close look, right? I mean, is there a solution to that? Well, not really. That's how sewing machines work, right? So, how do you do it? Now, you take your glasses off.
Well, I have contact lenses. Well, if I take my contact lenses out or my glasses off, I can see and I get close up, I can see the needle hole, no problem. Or if I wear a pair of reading glasses, I can see it
What, a pair of cheaters?
Yeah.
Like dollar store cheaters or
Yeah.
something like that? Okay, well, that's one way to see the hole. There is another way you can see the hole. I have seen people, they take a very fine pin and they will stick that through the hole as guidance and then get down there with their thread. And when they pull that out, they push the other one in. It sort of gives them an alignment. In my way of thinking, that's even more difficult. But what can you do about trying to see the hole? Well, there are devices that you can buy that'll help you with it. Now, I'm not talking about magnifying glasses, although that's not such a bad idea. But before I talk about that, one of the problems we have with, you can see the hole, but you're taking the thread end and you're trying to get it in, and it misses. It goes this way, it goes that way, and whatnot. Well, you may not have a clean cut on your thread. If you don't, and you may not even see it, it can be a little teeny fiber that's almost invisible. And if that's hitting the needle hole first, it's going to push the thread away. I mean, the thread's not very stiff, is it? Now, how can you avoid that? Cut your thread at a 45-degree angle with a good pair of fabric scissors that are really sharp. That will help. But here's something that I did learn. If you look on your spool of thread, oftentimes it'll say it's 2-ply. It means it's 2 strands of thread wound together. When you cut the end of your thread, if you tug on it a little bit, which would be normal to do, when you've cut it, it'll start to unravel just a little bit. That makes the thread thicker. You can't get it through the hole. So do not put any tension on your thread. I learned this from doing long arm. This is what my long arm person told me to do.
Yeah, because your long arm doesn't have a needle threader on it.
No, it doesn't. And she said what'll happen is, because the thread you use for quilting is usually more than 1-ply, it will start, if you tug on it, like you've got it all wound through your threading system, and you tug on it, you're putting a little tension on it, and then you snip it, well, it's spring action. It recoils, and it'll start to unravel just a little bit on the end. So let the thread go limp, cut it 45-degree angle because it gives you a slight little point, and then just hang on to it about an inch away from the end and plunge it in. And that will help, believe it or not. I do that all the time, and I have a lot less problems. Somebody else told me lick it. Okay, well, I think everybody's done that in hand sewing. However, you only lick it once, and you don't touch it when it's wet, because it'll go limp. Try it.
Actually,
Lick
what
it, touch
I
it.
use for what I do with a lot with the if I thread a needle is I use a pair of tweezers to hold
And
it.
how does that work?
It for some reason it's easier to get the thread. You get the thread through the needle, and the little piece will stick out the other side, and you grab the tweezers and it pull the thread through.
So you're not using the tweezers to push it through the needle.
Yes, you are.
Oh,
Like you
okay.
you can hold the thread right close to the end, right?
Yeah.
And shove that little piece through with the tweezers. And then on the other side, because there's only a little piece that hanging out, you grab that little piece with the tweezers. Your fingers are too fat to do that with.
Don't speak for yourself. I have long tapery fingers.
And I learned that actually from the sewing store we go to, because I watched the owner of the store do exactly the same thing.
Okay, so do you use ordinary tweezers, or do you use bent nose
I
tweezers
use those bent nose tweezers.
that
Actually, the
clamp
ones
when you
that
let
came,
go?
no, they clamp when I push them together,
They
but they're
open.
bent. They open when you let go, and they close when you push them together.
Oh, okay, I use the exact opposite.
They're ones that came with my serger, so.
Oh, okay. Because I do use the tweezer method when I'm threading Lucy.
Mm.
But Lucy's needle has a little bigger hole, and all I do is I push that through. But because I have a special attachment under where the needle goes down through, it's sort of a cup like thing. It's not easy to get your fingers in there to grab the end of the thread and pull it through. So I just use these bent nose tweezers.
I
But
don't like the tweezers that you have.
I like those because it takes time. You got to get used to it because it works in the opposite way of
Yeah.
usual tweezers. Usually, to close tweezers, you push on them. For these ones, what you do is you push on them to open. So what happens is you've got them, you grab the thing, you just let go of the tweezers, and it grabs right on, and it's got a good clamp and pulls through. It does take time to get used to it because it works in the opposite way you expect tweezers to work. But I like those. And I like the bent nose because it you can kind of get in there a little bit more. Is that why you use the bent nose? Because you can get
Well, actually, it's just the ones I'm used to using.
Okay,
So.
fine. I thought there'd be a theory. No theory. Okay. But if you're having trouble getting your thread through the hole, tweezers might help you with that, sort of an extension of your fingers. But what I was saying about licking it, and this also came from the same source that Walter found out about the tweezers from Ultimate Sewing. You lick it once, wet it once, but then don't touch the wet end. And that will stiffen it just enough that you may get it through. If you touch it with your finger, and I didn't believe this when she first told me this, but you try the experiment. Lick it, touch it, it goes down. It doesn't stay. This sounds gross. Or sounds sort of filthy, doesn't it? It won't stay up if you touch it. Oh, well, okay. You go wherever you want to go with that one. All right, so that might help you get it in. Okay, might help you thread the needle. Okay, that's what we're talking about, people. Let's stay on track on threading the needle. Now, this is, of course, all manual. The other thing that people do wrong is size of thread and the size of the hole in the needle. We've gone over threads and needles before. The larger the number, okay, let me get this straight. Larger the number on a needle, the smaller the hole, right?
The bigger the hole.
The bigger the hole. The larger the number on your thread weight, the thinner the thread. Okay? So if you've got a 30 weight thread, which is fairly thick, and you're trying to put it through a 14 hole on the needle, probably not going to work. Okay? You're going to be, it's just not going to go in. It's just too big to get into that hole. Okay, here we go again. There's no other way to show it. Think what you want. So you can't get it in, but if it's thinner and your hole's bigger, it's going to go right in, no problem. I'm trying to keep a straight face when I do that. Obviously, you can't. So, what are you? Pubescent boy?
Yeah.
Really?
I don't know.
Well, you get to a certain age where you return to your childhood. So, okay. So, yeah. So you want to make sure you have that. It is important. There's also something else that's important, but we'll talk about that a little later on about the hole size and the thread size and the whole bit that could cause you problems as you're sewing. But for now, that's manual. Okay. But the thing I'm seeing a lot of people getting frustrated with, and I was one of those people, is the automatic threader. Now, this is where your manual would come in very handy. What the threader works the first time you use it and then it doesn't work ever again. Well, you might not have read the part in your manual in the fine print that said that the automatic threader does not work with all needles, all sizes of needles and all sizes of thread. In fact, on the Janome M7, mine, it says, notes right here in the book. It says,
and on my E6700, I have it here too.
And it probably says exactly the same thing.
I'm gonna listen to what you have to say.
Okay, mine says, note, the needle threader can be used with a number 11 to a number 16 needle.
That's
number 11 to a number 16, the same in yours?
Yeah.
Thread size 50 to 90 is recommended.
Yes, that's what it says.
Do not use thread size 30 or thicker. So don't use a 12, don't use a 14, don't use a 20, don't use a 30, because it's not going to work. The needle threader cannot be used with the twin needle, which to me would seem pretty obvious because it's not in the right spot, but maybe it's not so obvious. I missed that note on my MC 15,000 when I first got it, because it had a completely automatic needle threader. I just pushed a button once the machine was threaded. And basically, the only difference between it and what's on our Janomes is on our Janomes, there's a little button and you pull it down and it.
Yeah, the one that I have, it's sort of you push it down, and the one you had on your 15,000 was motorized.
Yeah, motorized. Right?
So you couldn't stop it in the middle of the needle thread. Whereas when you're with the 6700, I have a lever that I pull down, and if I can watch it happen, if it's not going to go through the needle, I can see.
You can feel it.
I can feel it not doing it, right? So the other thing that they don't really tell you much, well, they do, I guess, in this thing, is that your needle position has to be correct.
Oh, yeah, that's important.
On there, like they suggest here to press the up-down key for the needle, because sometimes your needle might be in a position where it's a little lower than or a little higher in its wherever it stopped, right? And if it didn't stop in a correct position, and it could or you could have manually moved the needle up or down a little bit on the flywheel. So if it's not in the correct position, the centered position, it will not up or down, it will not thread.
Okay, there is now Walter said move your needle up and down if you have an automatic
up and down button.
But on our Janomes, we have a lockout button. It's a safety feature. When you hit that button, uh, the machine assumes that you're about to either change your needle, thread your machine, change your foot, or change your foot plate. And so it locks it. So, you don't get your hand under there when you're doing something and you'll through your hand. But that also positions the needle in exactly the right place for the needle threader. However, there are times when that isn't always necessarily so. So if you slowly bring it down, do it slow, you'll feel it. If when you're bringing it down, if it suddenly it feels you pushing on it, and as it comes down, it starts to turn in to push the little wire, the little hook through the eye of the needle. If you feel resistance on there, then there's a problem. One of the problems could be, of course, what I already said, you're using the wrong thread with the wrong size needle, or you're using one they say not use. The other thing is the needle's not in the right position. Use your flywheel. Crank it up slowly so the needle's going up. When you get to that point where the needle is about to start its traveling down, stop. Now you should be in the right position for threading it with the automatic needle threader. But don't do what a lot of people do. Oh, automatic needle threader. Easy. Okay, got it all set up. Where we go. Bang! Boom, boom. I did that.
And if you do that too bad, the component of the needle threader is a tiny, tiny little hook.
And we're going to show you what we mean.
And that can get bent. And if
And
that gets bent, your needle threader is screwed.
it's screwed, but it's not the end of the world yet. There is a way to fix it, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But so, what to know if your automatic needle threader is not threading? Check what we just said. The position of the needle, make sure you're using the right thread and the right needle combination in that as well. Now, if you've tried all that and you're still having a problem and you're sure that all those other things are correct, then this might be where you have to have an adjustment to your needle threader. Now, a lot of people don't want to do this because it is extremely tedious, and it's not hard, but you need a lot of patience. And I have fixed the needle threader on all my machines with it. And I'm going to show you a little diagram of what we're talking about here, what it looks like. Go to the screen. Okay, let's see if we can blow that up a little bit. Oops. It's a little grainy, but that's good enough. Okay. If you take a look here, here is the mechanism that you put your finger on and you pull down, and this little block turns around and it sticks this, and here's an inset. Here's the little hook we're talking about. It's a tiny, tiny, tiny little wire, and it's very thin.
It's thin enough to go through the hole in your needle.
Yeah. I mean, this shows it really blown up, but it's not. It's almost impossible to see that hook part that's there. So that is what's lining up when you pull down that lever, and it's going through that hole. And that little hook comes through there, and the way that you have run the thread across in front of the needle, according to the instructions in the book, it grabs that, pulls it back, and it's on a spring action. So it goes in, comes out, bang, really fast, and that pulls your thread through, and you'll have a little loop of thread, and you just pull the loop through, and it's threaded. But so you can see that can't handle too many different sizes, because it's only geared towards, well, what it said in the book for the Janomes anyways, a number 11 to a number 16 needle and thread weight of 50 to 90. That's all it can handle. If you're trying to put in a thicker thread through that hole,
yeah, like if I use my machine for top stitching, which I often use a 28 weight thread or a 12 weight thread, it's too thick to go through the needle threader, so I have to manually thread the needle then.
Yeah. So yeah, they're very, very delicate, and they can bend because that thing is so fine. That little
And I have been in a class before where people are complaining their needle threader's not working when they're using the thicker thread, and I tell them they can't do that.
Yeah, but they don't believe you with it, because you figure it just says it's a needle threader. It should thread everything. but it doesn't. So that's why check your manual for that. Now in our manuals, it's in the section where they talk about the built-in needle threader. If you've got it, and we both have Janomes. So what it is for Bernina or whatever, I have no idea, but there must be a section in your manual for that. Now, that little wire, I said there is a way to fix this. Now, first of all, if that little wire breaks off, no, you can't fix it. You can order the whole unit. They're not that expensive, and you can put it on yourself, but most people don't want to do it. Although there are YouTube videos showing you, and they all work slightly different on different machines as far as installing it. My way of thinking is if it's to that point, just take it into your dealer and have them replace the unit. It doesn't cost that much. I've had several of them replaced on the MC 15,000 when I had it.
Actually, I have the original one on the 6700. I've never had to replace it.
No, you're just precious. You're just so precious. But anyways, I can fix them. You've never fixed it.
No, because it never broke from me.
You're God. You're God. You really are. I am not worthy. I am not
And
worthy.
the one that you did fix, you fixed on my embroidery machine while you were using it.
Oh, that's right. Well, you see, I fixed it. Works fine now, doesn't it? Now, how did I fix it? It's a little wire. It means that the little wire is slightly bent, and it doesn't take much. You won't even see the bend on it. So it's a little bit of an experiment. You have to take a very small, thin screwdriver, and you get under there, magnifying glass helps, and you just take that screwdriver, put it up against that, and bend it either to the right or to the left. Only a teeny bit. Now, how do you know which way to bend it? You don't, because you can't see it. Okay? Unless you've got really good eyesight. So you have to do it by experiment, but you will have to play with it a little bit. You gonna live?
Yeah, I'm
Jeez.
bored with you talking.
Well, bye. Now I lost my train of thought. Anyways, use this tiny screwdriver in there, and you just push on just slightly, and bend it one way or the other, and you can probably adjust it. And I've done it enough times now that I kind of know it by feel with it. Now, if you bend it too much, you might break it off. Okay? It's kind of like a piece of thin metal, if you go back and forth, snap. Well, that could happen to this too. So you got to be careful with it. But try that. Now, for help with this, I have put a link to a video on YouTube showing what I'm talking about. There are many videos on YouTube, and some of them are geared towards different brands of sewing machines. However, this automatic threader that we have on our machine is a pretty much a standard design. This is what they use on most machines. So, if you can't find one specific for your machine, look at one of the other machines, because it probably works the same with it. And if you don't feel confident with that, take it to your dealer. But it's user. This is one time when it's user error. You tried to put too big a thread through a too small a hole or whatever with it. So, yeah. So that's how you fix them. Now, let's say worst case scenario, you don't want to try to fix it yourself. What are you going to do? You want an easier way to thread it without having to rely on the things I was talking about before, like wetting the end, using tweezers and that. There is a gizmo for this, and you have probably seen them, and I love them. They work really well, and you can get them on Amazon, and it's this thing. This is a package of 3, $8.29. I think I bought 2 packages of 3 at one time because they do wear out. This little device is a threader, but it works very much in the same way as the automatic threader on your sewing machine works. You notice the shape of it at the top? You have this little plastic piece that sticks out.
Are you showing it or not?
Oh, there we go. This is what I'm talking about. Let's go back. This is a package of 3. Okay, that's what they look like. Okay, they have 2 ends. They have this end up here, and then they have this end here, and there's a spring down the middle. Now, what happens when you put this in? It works the same way. There is, let's see, I think they have a picture of it. See that? When you press it against your needle, this little wire will flip out. So you thread, get your thread onto this. You thread your machine up into the point of the needle. There's a little V cut in the end. Oh, do they show a better picture of it? Yeah. See, there's a little V on the end of that white end of it. You slide that down the shaft of your needle until you get down to the hole, and just by giving a little bit of pressure, that little wire I just showed you will stick out because it's spring loaded, and it'll go through the hole. And they will show you how to run the thread down inside this. You just put the thread down inside the V at the same time, and that little wire, it doesn't actually have a hook on it. It just pushes the thread through the hole. And then you slowly let it release. Sometimes it'll pull your thread back out through the hole, so you got to play with it a little bit. And then you have a loop, and you just grab the loop and pull it through, and you've threaded it. They work very well. I've used them all the time when I've had a problem threading. And this is a good thing to have when you can't use your automatic threader because you have thread that's too thick. And you can't use that with the automatic threader. So this will help. What's this end for? That's for inserting needles. You'll notice there's a round end on your needle shaft. At the end of it, you have a rounded edge and a flat edge. The rounded edge goes towards you, and the flat edge is to the back of the machine, or is that the front of the machine?
Back of the machine.
Back of the machine. And that's how you position it. It's set up. The mechanism that holds your needle is set up for that configuration. But it's easy enough to try and put your needle in there and you put it in backwards, and that's going to cause you a problem because your scarf and everything are not going to be lined up properly. This avoids that. You drop your needle in there, you fit it in to where that little cutout of the round shape is, the back of the needle, so you've got it in the right position, and you lift it up into the you just lift it up into the holder for the needle, tighten it up, take that down. It's great. It works really well. So
it actually holds your needle too.
Yeah, it actually holds your needle for you as well. Instead of having take your fingers and trying to get it up there and then tightening it all, you just poop up. Works like a charm. I love these things. They're very inexpensive. Like a package of 3 for $8.29 on Amazon, and they will wear out over time if you're using them all the time. That's why the pack of 3. But essentially, that's how they work. They work on the same principle as an automatic needle threader, except it's manual. So if you're having trouble threading your needle, you might want to invest in one of these. Okay, so the other problem you might be having that has nothing to do with your automatic threader, but could cause a problem with your automatic threader, is that your thread, as you've put it all together, as you've threaded your machine, your thread is shredding. That means you definitely have not matched up the size of your thread to the size of your needle. Because if your hole is too small in the needle and you're putting in a bigger thread and you're doing this manually, and you can get it in, you can get a thicker
it will
thread.
start to shred.
It'll shred because it's rubbing on the eye of the needle, and vice versa. If your hole's too big in your needle for really fine thread, then what's going to happen is your thread's going to loop back on itself in your machine, and that's when you're going to get tangles, or it's going to shred again or tangle up. So it's important that you use the right needle with the right thread. It really is. And that seems obvious to some of us, but I know many people who haven't got a clue about that. They don't think it matters. As long as you've got a needle and you've got a thread, it's going to work. No, not so.
Also, if you're using this is sort of off topic a little bit, but if you're using a thick thread, like a top stitching thread, like 30 weight or something like that, you can't use that kind of thread in the bobbin.
Oh,
right. You need a finer thread in there because it'll tangle up very easily.
Okay, that is actually a good point, because people talk about winding bobbins.
Like, so if you're using like a top stitch thread, which is, I've used a 12 before, or a 28 weight thread, I'll use a 40 or 50 weight or 60 weight thread in the bobbin.
And you want to know something? I heard just recently people were talking about their embroidery machines, and they were winding their own bobbins for it, and they were having a lot of problems. Well, I know my embroidery machine hates. I use Floriani embroidery thread for my top stitches, but if my machine does not like Floriani on a bobbin, winding your own bobbin.
Yeah.
What I use is a thinner thread. It's a pre-wound bobbin from Montville. I buy them, and you've heard us talk about Montville before, montville.ca. We buy them by the gross lot, 144 in a box, 25 bucks. Just bought 2 boxes the other day. They're pre-wound, they're great. They're 60 weight thread, and they're white. And for those of you that do machine embroidery, you're probably saying, well, yeah, but I have to match my bobbin thread with my top thread when I'm embroidering. No, you don't. In fact, there's very few cases that I have found where I can't get away with just using the
Yeah.
pre-wound
The
white
only,
bobbins.
there's only a few times where you're doing like certain freestanding lace projects and stuff like that, that it helps if your bobbin matches your top thread, but very
And you want to know
rarely.
something? Even then, I don't use it
Well,
because the way that a freestanding lace is, there's so many layers of the top thread,
mhm,
it wraps around to the back with the other one. And you see, if you're using a light white bobbin thread and it's thinner, it's really not that
mhm.
noticeable. I mean, if you're really, really, really particular and you want exactly the front and the back to look exactly the same, then yes.
Then you're better off using a standard thread that somewhat matches the top thread.
Yeah, go with it. But yeah, and but back to this whole winding your own bobbins kind of a thing. Yes, you can, but you've got to follow your directions on your sewing machine for doing it right. I just saw a video yesterday, and the person on that video was showing how to do it properly and showed the mistakes that she had made because she didn't put the thread along the path for winding it on a bobbin in exactly the order. And it was a little thing, but that little thing makes a
Hmm.
difference. She said if your bobbin thread feels squishy when you've wound it, don't use it because it's the tension's off. It'll
And you'd
cause
be
you problems.
surprised, there's a lot of people like even the ones that were in my sewing class that were complaining that they couldn't wind a bobbin on their machine. What were they doing wrong?
Yeah. You think something like that's pretty simple, but nope. Follow the directions. And back to the whole thing with your automatic threader. This can cause you a problem with your automatic threader as well, because not that you're using the automatic threader to wind a bobbin, but if your bobbin isn't right, if your thread in that is too loose or whatever, and you get a bird's nest and you know it pulls the thread, top thread through the needle, and you get a big bunched up through the needle and you're trying to get it off and it's all tangled up, and you go like this, you go bang, 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 and pull on it, you may have bent your needle. And when you've bent your needle, your automatic needle threader, the next time you go to use it, won't
Won't work.
line up, won't work. So, another tip, if you're having trouble and you've tried everything else and you haven't used the wrong threads or anything like that, change your needle because they bend. Which brings up another thing, two things. Needles. Use good quality needles. Don't be buying your sewing needles brands you've never heard of before. What's a good brand? Schmidt's, Oregon, and ones that are recommended by your sewing machine company. Like
Yeah.
Janome has their own brand. They're probably made by Oregon.
There are other manufacturers that are name brand, but we can't really think of right now.
No,
But
well, those ones
those
I
two
mentioned are the
are,
most popular in North America.
yeah.
Now, there is some controversy around a needle that you can get. They're supposed to last longer. They're made from titanium. They're very hard. I was told, now I was using titanium needles in both my embroidery machine and in my regular sewing machine as well. Um, I don't know. I had a little bit of a fear put into me from my long arm person, Tracy at Whirls and Swirls. She said, don't put a titanium needle in your long arm. She said, they don't break very easily. And your system is set up as a safety feature to allow, if there's a problem happens and the needle comes down or whatever, you want it to break. You want the needle to break. The titanium ones don't. And if they hit your needle plate, they will damage your needle plate and they could throw the timing off on your whole long arm. So I'm applying that philosophy to embroidery machines and my regular sewing machine. I'm not using titanium anymore because, sewing machines, especially, it's not that hard to knock your timing out. And I just don't want to take the chance. And what's the purpose of the titanium needles?
They last longer.
Yeah, big deal. How expensive are needles? They're not, for
Well,
five.
titaniums are actually pretty expensive.
Yeah, they are. But what I'm saying is don't nickel and dime your most essential supplies. Sewing needles for your sewing machine are not that expensive. So
I change my needle quite often.
I do too. And that's another thing. Keep your needle sharp. Also, okay, here's another thing why your automatic threader might not work. You could get a burr on the inside of your needle hole because you had a jam. You had a big tangle. Now you're gonna think, well, thread, it's just thread.
You can also get it can also come on the needle if it hasn't been manufactured properly.
Yeah. So, if you've done everything else right and it's still not threading, change the needle out. Because, yeah, like Walter said, sometimes they come with a burr and you can't see it. You can't see it. It's too small.
If your needle, if your thread is, you call it, if it's shredding or
Yeah.
whatever, make sure your machine's threaded properly. Make sure you're using the right needle size for your thread, and if it's still not threading, change your needle.
Yeah. Change your needle. In fact, I just had this happen a couple hours ago. I had done 2 table runners on Lucy. And although this is not a domestic machine, the needle kind of business we've been talking about, except for the fact it doesn't have an automatic threader on it, the same kind of philosophy. Um, it was going along very nicely. I had done 2 table runners on it. I didn't change out my needle. I figured, well, those 2 table runners didn't, they took no time at all and whatnot. I finished a couple of rows on the quilt, on the Halloween quilt, and then I had replaced the bobbin thread because I'd run out and everything, started up again, and it broke. The thread broke. Well, it hadn't come unthreaded, so that meant there's a problem with the bobbin. So sometimes it happens. I moved the machine, I took out the bobbin, I looked at it, made sure that nothing was binding the thread, put it all back together, put it in, started it up, it broke the thread again. There's a problem, and it's not with the bobbin. So I took out the needle, I put in a brand new needle. Yep, that was the problem. So again, needles aren't that expensive. Have a supply on hand, change them regularly. And the other thing you need to do, and you've heard us say this many, many times before because we both believe in this very strongly, keep your machine clean regularly. Keep your automatic threader mechanism clean. When you're cleaning out your bobbin case and everything with your little brush, brush down the automatic threader because you could have a tiny little piece of lint on that little wire that you don't even notice because it's not easy to see that little wire the way it's tucked back in there. And so if that's there and it's trying to push that little piece of lint through the needle hole and it can't. So clean it. Clean, clean, clean. Clean's important. Would you agree?
Yes.
Very good. See eye to eye on that one. Eye to eye. Get it? Little needle joke. Okay. So if you're having trouble seeing your hole in your needle, get a magnifying glass with a light on it.
Or reading glasses.
Or reading glasses. Now there is something, I have a pair, I've never used them. They hang around your neck and they're 2 little LED lights. They have about 3 brightnesses on it. Somebody I know has a pair of those, loves them for fine work like cross stitching or knitting and something like that. And I thought these might be really handy for being able to see, my needle. I never use them for that because I have other methods, but you can get them on Amazon, those kind of things. Or some sewing machines actually have an optional magnifying glass system that you can get that attaches to them, but it's usually an option. That might help you too if you're having trouble seeing the hole in there. So anyways, Walter's getting bored now. He's looking at his watch, going, "Yeah, he's got something important that he needs to do."
I'm tired of listening to you.
Very complimentary. Another use for spent needles is jab somebody in the throat with them. Let me see. Let me thread your eye hole. Whatever. So yeah, so that's it. So you can try all these things. You're having trouble with your automatic threader. See how that works for you. Worst case scenario, take it to your dealer. Because you've got a major problem. Maybe. Okay, hope you found this helpful. There's a link in the show notes to the thing about fixing an automatic threader. Use it your own.
Risk.
Yeah, with it, depends on how mechanically inclined you might be with it. And I also put a link to getting those threaders that I showed you a few minutes ago as well to Amazon. Okay, don't forget about Craft and Chat, September the 7th, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Be there, be square. And have a good week. And we'll see you all later. Say goodbye,
Yep.
Walter.
Goodbye.